local chapter Nigeria. And of course, you can watch us live. Okay, thank you, sir, for your address. You can come up for your address, sir.
Good evening, everyone. I wish to welcome all of you to this technical session. I would like to start by saying that Total is always first in so many things. So we are forced to sponsor the first Eage local chapter technical session today. And I would also like to let you know that the current president of Eage is also somebody from Total in the name of Mr. Jean-Jacques. He was here during the NAPE conference, I think in November last year, and he also made some presentations, and he also did some coaching to students, I think the student section. Okay, let me start by saying that Total have been serving the Nigerian hydrocarbon industry for more than half a century in partnership with the Nigerian government and in different equity associations with other private companies. Total E&P Nigeria Limited, in short TEPNG, as people know us, is an affiliate of Total SA and has operated in the upstream sector of the Nigerian hydrocarbon industry for more than 50 years and has added over 3 billion barrels of oil equivalent to the Nigerian production to date. Incorporated in Nigeria in 1962, TEPNG has maintained strong, steadfast partnerships with the Nigerian government, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation (NNPC), and several indigenous companies in developing the country's hydrocarbon industry. TEPNG operates and holds a 40% interest in the NNPC TEPNG joint venture producing oil and gas from several onshore shallow water concessions. Another Total affiliate, Total Upstream Nigeria Limited, in short TOPNI, operates the Akpo and Ejina fields in OMA 130 deepwater lease. And by the special grace of God, we also start producing from Greenway Field very soon. I can see Mr. Mamodu smiling. Do you agree with us?
I agree with you.
So you also know that the Ejina field started production in December 2018, and they're bringing additional 200,000 barrels of oil per day to Nigerian production. In fact, most of you witnessed the big boats, the FPSO, when it was at Ladol some few months ago, and a lot of people were taking photographs. People haven't seen that kind of thing before. In fact, that FPSO is the largest in Nigeria and also the largest in the Total group so far. In TEPNG, we also have interest in the SPDC operated joint venture. We have 10%, the Bonga field 12.5%, and the Usan field with 20%. Total also has a 15% interest in the Nigerian LNG, which currently operates 6 LNG liquefaction trains on Bonny Island. It is also worthy to let you know that TEPNG is committed to closely working with host communities and is supporting many projects in the areas of health, education, infrastructure, and economic development through its sustainable development and community relations programs. TEPNG delivers world-class energy solutions, adds economic value to the country, and promotes best practices in safety and environment, business ethics, and corporate social responsibilities, with staff drawn from many nationalities and cultures working together. TEPNG is proud of its diversity, and contributions to the socio-economic development of Nigeria. As the only oil and gas, integrated oil and gas company in Nigeria today, I would like to also mention some of our downstream activities. Today, in this country, we are the only integrated oil and gas upstream and downstream. The downstream activities managed by Total Nigeria PLC, the leader in the downstream sector of the Nigerian oil and gas industry, which has extensive distribution network of over 550 service stations nationwide and a wide range of top quality energy products and services. To satisfy the evolving needs of its customers, Total developed a one-stop center strategy whereby a variety of customer needs are met in one place. Total service stations, therefore, add solutions to receiving premium care from service assistance customers. We have purchase of petroleum products like gas, lubricants, car products, insecticides, conveniently at our Cafe Bonjour shops. You have them all over the country today, along Lekki and also on the Lagos Island. Meanwhile, corporate customers demand for bulk products, are met through our vendor management services and equipment and technical assistance services. Ladies and gentlemen, I would also want to wish you a very good deliberation during today's technical meeting. And you are going to listen to, like Mr. Rewoli said, you are going to listen to one of our best staff, personnel in our company, both of them specialists. One in sedimentology, Mr. Mamodu, and the other person, Mr. Olatunbosun Olagundoye, who is also a specialist in reservoir seismic characterization. So I wish all of you a good deliberation in this technical session. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sure most of us we know Mrs. Marcelli, formerly with DPR. So when Ms. Marcelli was to retire rather, so we had a discussion. So, and of course, I was worried about a lot of things. And she told me, "Everybody, don't worry. The person that will replace me is even better than me." So, and that is the truth. So when Mr. Amadasu was announced as the head of upstream, we were all happy. And I remember in my office, Mr. Machino said, "Yes, this is good. This is a very good one." So I welcome the chairman for his own address and introduction.
Okay, thank you so much for that introduction. Gentlemen and ladies, I just want to tell you this evening that I'm not here to sanction your approval. I'm here for all of us to learn and share knowledge. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, the president of Eage, the representative of Total Management, our distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, we want to welcome you to this forum to share knowledge. This is the kind of thing we need in the industry, so that whatever you know, you impart on another person. And that is what we are going to be doing this evening. Before we start, I would like to introduce the speaker this evening, and they have just 20 minutes, or they're about to speak on a topic. I've been told that you are specialists. We want to see you demonstrating that this evening. And then after each speaker, we'll then give 10 minutes of Q&A, and then we'll move to the next session. Also, let me congratulate every one of us for being part of this first first edition of Eage. We believe that going forward, we're going to have a larger audience. And when you also write history about this association, You have every cause to see in the first edition, I was there. So on that note, we want to introduce, read the profile of Mr. Mamodu Ogwogho. Mr. Mamodu Ogwogho joined Total, formerly F Petroleum Nigeria Limited, in 2003. He obtained his first degree from Federal University. Please, can you stand up so that everybody will know who we are? Thank you so much. He obtained his first degree from Federal University of Technology, Bauchi, and a master's degree from the Institut Français du Pétrole, ENSPM. He started his career as a website geologist in Port Harcourt. He subsequently worked as an exploration geologist for 8 years, and now as a sedimentologist and seismic stratigrapher. He has been involved in different exploration, appraisal, and development subjects from Angola, Norway, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Nigeria, from the onshore to the deep water domain. He currently oversees sedimentology studies and intervention for the Total E&P, Nigeria subsidiary in the joint venture, and deep water assets. He has been with Total E&P Nigeria for 15 years. He plays football as a hobby. He's married with children. Please, on this note, let's give thank you so much. So we also look at the profile of our second presenter. Please, can Dr. Olatunbosun Olagundoye stand up? Thank you so much. He joined Total, formerly F Petroleum Nigeria Limited, in 2004 as a geophysicist, after holding lecturing position in the University of Calabar, Nigeria from 1996 to 2004. He currently works as a senior reservoir geophysicist in the Geoscience and Reservoir Engineering Division of Total Upstream Nigeria Limited in Lagos, Nigeria. From 2013 to 2016, he held a similar position in the Seismic Reservoir Characterization team of Total in its scientific center in Pau, southwest France. He is in charge of seismic reservoir characterization studies. He holds BSc honors, MSc, and PhD degrees in petroleum geophysics from the University of Calabar, Nigeria. His major area of interest include rock physics, seismic interpretation, seismic reservoir characterization, DHI analysis, AVU studies, seismic evaluation, and aeromagnetic data interpretation stroke modeling. He has several scientific publications to his credit. He is a certified petroleum geophysicist and an active member of NMGS, NAPE AAPG, SEG, and the SPE. In 2002, he received the Nigeria Mining and Geoscientist Society /AGIP Young Geoscientist of the Year Award. His hobbies include football and chess. He is also married with children. Please join me. You're welcome. So this afternoon, we all know the importance of this topic: integrated seismic reservoir characterization and sedimentology for well placement optimization. We know the importance of well placement, and that is why we as regulators, when you want to submit your FTP, we are very careful in looking at how you place your well. The reason, of course, is for us to be able to maximize recovery, and of recovery for both government and also for all stakeholders, including the operators. So this evening, we are going to listen to them, and I believe that at the end of today's presentation, we'll have something to take home. Thank you so much. I will now call on the first presenter, Dr. Mamodu. Mr. Mamodu. Not yet. He's in the making. Mr. Mamodu Ogwogho. Please give him a round of applause. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mamodu once again. I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Olatunbosun. We will be doing this presentation together. And like the topic says, integrated, so the presentation itself will be integrated. So, so the topic once again is integrated seismic reservoir characterization and sedimentology for well placement optimization. And this is how we're going to do it this evening, so you'll flow with us. We will first of all start with a workflow on well optimization, which was built by the asset. And then we will give you some basics and introductions because we know we have a mixed audience here today. So we shall talk in part about sedimentology, just so that we get some background, and also talk about seismic reservoir characterization. So please note the acronym SRC, it will be repeated often. Then we will examine a case study which is from a reservoir, the R12 in the deep water setting of the Niger Delta, and we will talk about how we went about the process of optimization. And finally, we'll round up with a summary and then conclusions. So let's just give a little background to what we're talking about here today in part, which is the well optimization. What do we really mean by this? So basically, as the the boxes will point to us, when we talk about well optimizations, we are interested in how we can have an effective field development. Now, all of us are aware of the context we are in the industry today, with the oil price and many other things that come with it. So we need to be effective in whatever we do. So we have to think about cost effectiveness. We have to think about how we can get the maximum in terms of efficiency in our sweep of all our fields. Then we also have to talk about, in that same regard, the production and recovery rates we expect, because we want to get the best production with the best value. So in doing that, we have to then think about what kinds of wells should we do. Now we can do horizontal wells, we can do vertical wells. We also have to think about what about the number of wells that we want to have in that. So we're talking about the producers and the injectors, what is the ratio? We'll look at that in part today. Then we also have to think about the well patterns. What kind of density do we have? Like we see here, the 5 spot or the 9 spot. Then very importantly, which is the focus for today, we'll talk about then the well placement. How do we want to build the trajectories, inclination, azimuth, and the like? What's their position within the reservoir with respect to the contact? You will see in this case we are reviewing here today, we have a very narrow window in terms of the fluid contact and the reservoir thicknesses as well as the volumes. Then the final step, well by well perturbation, which will not be the focal point, but is still part of the flow. So this is an integrated approach to make us reduce our risk, okay, but we are conscious of it, make good decisions that are very effective for development of any field, especially in the deep offshore, the Niger Delta. So quickly, some basics about sedimentology so that we can have a background. So you permit me today, when I use the term sedimentology, I use it a bit loosely here, but it covers sequence stratigraphy, it covers sedimentary environment, so I just give it a broad name, sedimentology. So what is the interest? Like I said, we are an E&P company, exploration and production, and what we want is to find hydrocarbons, not water, hydrocarbons, and in commercial quantities. Now this is geology, so to find hydrocarbons we need a working petroleum system. Now what is a petroleum system? Of course we need some elements which we call one, source rock, a reservoir rock, a sea rock, an overburden rock, and of course the processes associated with them. So I highlighted rock, and of course because we're talking about rocks, most of us know we have 3 kinds of rocks: igneous rocks, sedimentary and metamorphic rocks. But we are most interested in our domain in the sedimentary rocks. So what is a sedimentary rock? It's a body formed from sediments or solutes that are transported and deposited by different processes, gravity, biology. Today we'll find out the one we're interested in is the gravity deposits, because we're talking about turbidites. So we need to understand the sediments, hence the term sedimentology. So basically sedimentology is the study of the production, the transportation, and deposition of sediments. So this is what now my work and what we do is where it comes in. Production, where do they come from? Transportation, how are they carried? Deposition, where can I find them? So the Niger Delta is a prolific basin, so we know a lot of things about it. But we are very interested in scales when we discuss sedimentary bodies and in part sedimentology. So on the upper image here, this is a seismic image, just to tell us the kind of scales we can be looking at in such a setting. We can be looking at tens of kilometers to kilometers, so it's quite large. Then this is a corresponding map coming from such a scale, tens of kilometers to kilometers. Then we are all quite familiar with the well log scales. So this is when we have drilled wells. So the scales here are much smaller now, tens of meters to meters. Then we also have a much refined scale which we get from borehole images. Okay, they are also well logged, but they are borehole images, and the resolution is much improved from meters to centimeters. Then of course, in special cases, exploratory and otherwise, we could have what we call cores, which are the real geology coming from the earth. We could be looking at meters to centimeters, and in some cases millimeters. And of course, the smallest of these scales, we examine the thin sections, which are mostly done in the lab, centimetric to millimetric scales. But for us, in our subject today, the two scales that will be most predominant are these two, the seismic scale and the well log scale. So at this point, this is the objective of what we are trying to do. Basically, we work with seismic data. This image we have here is a seismic response. That is what my colleague will talk a lot about. But for me as a geologist, I am interested in bringing out the details. So this is an example from Sullivan in 2000, and it's from the famous Karoo Basin in South Africa. So here, on the outcrops, which is what most geologists are familiar with, we actually can interpret several channel bodies. And when we try to put them into a cartoon, we have these lovely images of channel bodies in amalgamations, sometimes connected, some of them disconnected. And then we build a model behind it to say this is what we expect it globally to be. But when we look at the seismic, depending on the nature of the seismic, the frequencies and many other things, we can just have a much more simplified image as this. So it's a loop we try to work with when we go from the seismic to the real thing, and when we go from the real thing to the seismic. So that poses a lot of challenges. And at this point, my colleague will take over and tell us how he goes about helping us to represent the images we find in geology.
Good evening. So I'll go, okay, can everybody hear me at the end? Yes. Good. So I'll proceed from where Mamodu stopped, go more or less the seismic domain way. So have a click. Okay. So basically, Mamodu told us a good story in this slide, so I'm supposed to debunk what he just said. So basically, this is what we do in seismic reservoir characterization. And we're going to try to make this a simple and mix it up since we have a mixed audience. Now, everybody's at least knows about this. This is just the Earth. And we know that basically in the Earth people have layers. So the question for me to answer is, what do I need in terms of this to get to a picture where I can go the mathematical way and also come back here to deduce the Earth? We all know in the seismic industry that the most powerful tool that we have is seismic data. To a basic man, it's just the same way working with echoes. You make a sound, it passes through objects, gets reflected, and comes back to a receiver. You measure the time, and you produce an image. So that's what you have here in terms of the seismic image. But basically, in mathematical terms, this is what it looks like. But who is going to interpret this just by looking at this? How do I know that this can be rocks or this can be all hydrocarbons? I need to find a way to go back to this. So basically what I'm trying to do is take a picture of geology, structure and sedimentology, convolve it, arrive at a seismic trace, and then go back with a question mark to this true model of geology and petro properties. Now that is just the basic relationship we are going to use in our well optimization. I'll go to the next slide. Now what are the fundamentals? I won't go through a lot of physics or a lot of maths, but basically what we will do is we'll take our wells. Anytime you drill a well, you have several information, you have logs, you have faults. At the same time, you have your seismic data, which is what you have as your resident simulations, the rest with your, and then you arrive at traces. You do one interpretation, you do your seismic interpretation. You can decide to go the inversion way, where you do your deconvolution or integration of your reflectivities. But the bottom line, like Mamodu said, is sedimentology. But the bottom line to us in the oil industry is actually what is the lithology, which is the sedimentology, But what is also contained within the lithology? What are the fluids? Is it oil, is it gas, is it water? So we go to the next slide. Now basically, in schematics, this is the typical workflow. In the oil industry, I'm actually interested in porosity, the saturation of hydrocarbons in the rocks, and then I can relate that based on the burial with their geologicity and then the gas-oil ratio, mineralogy, and texture. Basically, these are just the properties of the rocks. But I'm not able to measure this with my seismic data. I need to find a means to measure a property that is also related to them. And that's what we call in seismic reservoir characterization, these three basic parameters: P-wave velocity, S velocity, and the density of the rocks. Now, all these three properties are affected by whatever porosity you have or hydrocarbon saturation. The bottom line is that after this, I need to find a means to get what we call impedance, which is the resistance of that rock to sound waves. It is that resistance that gives me an idea of what kind of fluids I need and what kind of rock it is. So that's what brings us back to some kind of what we call modeling. Because I'm not able to directly measure this impedance from my seismic, I need to find a way to model it, to relate them to amplitude, phase, frequency, and LVO. I will explain this later on a bit more in detail. But the bottom line again is to come back, to do a reverse, and come back here so that I can reinterpret this as a model in terms of a shape of the earth, which will guide the reserve estimation and also your well placement. So this slide is just a summary. Everyone here understands that this is the earth. Basically, in basic mathematics, you take a wavelet and you convolve it. This is what you get in terms of seismic data. Now, but to the driller, this is quite, I can understand this as a geophysicist, but the driller is who is going to put the well in the soil, basically I don't understand it. So I need to find a way, because he believes in the depth domain. I am more a time domain person. So I need to find a way to relate my interpretations to depth so that he can place the well properly in the formation. Now to do that, I need to find a way as a geophysicist to go back in time so that I can arrive back at the earth model. Now to do that, all I need to do is, in mathematics, do an integration. More like a sigma, instead of doing a derivation, dy dx, I do an integration to go back in reflectivity to this. And when I do that, I just do a deconvolution of the wavelength with this, I get what we call an impedance. Now the major reason for that is, graphically, just visually, I'm sure everybody in this room, if I tell you to interpret any of these diagrams, apart from the earth model, this is the one that most likely looks like the earth, isn't it? Yes, but this is what you obtain in the field, and this is what you interpret normally in the office. So you need a way to arrive at a model that looks like this, that reflects what we call intervals instead of boundaries. Now if you do that, you widen the seismic bandwidth, and again you produce impedance. But the essence of all this workflow is for me to, as a lazy interpreter, a geophysicist, to arrive at the means of modeling the earth. And it is easy for me. I'm sure if you look at this, if I draw boundaries here, I see that this rock formation is quite different from this. If I look at the impedance model, I'm able to draw the same, but I'm basically not able to do that on the seismic. Now that is the essence of what we call seismic reservoir characterization. I have a reservoir, it contains oil or gas. I need to characterize it in such a way that it's going to be easy for you to place a well in that reservoir. And it's going to be easy for the driller to get us there at the end of the day. And it's going to be easier for the sedimentologist to interpret the rocks, the depositional environments, the porosities, as we go on. So a summary of reservoir characterization. This is your seismic. Basically, this is the contrast, this is the top, and this is the base, a wedge model. So your seismic basically sees the subsurface in terms of interfaces between geologic strata, which is what you see in outcrop more or less. That is if you are walking along the tip of the outcrop. Now, I'm not able to interpret this. I have to look for a way. I say, okay, I should be able to translate this in terms of layers. Now that brings us back to what I explained in the last slide, which is the impedances, where you can now interpret these so-called interfaces in terms of layers. So I can easily say that this same unit is the same lithologic unit, and what I have here is the same, it's a different lithologic unit and also a different one. I've deliberately tried not to mention a lot of complicated things. But one of the basic things we do at the end of the day is to arrive at this, what we call seismic reservoir characterization products, which is what you basically will see most seismic reservoir characterization specialists interpreting or geophysicists interpreting at the end of the day. And one of them is your AVO seismic matrix cube, your pseudo impedances, your seismic inversion cubes, which are your more or less rule of the thumb tools for interpretation of sedimentology and also structure as you go along. Now, what are the benefits of going through this route? You've seen already, based on the graphical representation of the Earth model, that it's easier for you to map reservoir units and flow units on a seismic reservoir characterization cube than it is on the basic seismic. So the bottom line is that with that, you can do more reservoir model filling, you can plan your wells clearly, and you can do some reservoir monitoring and your lithologic indication, as the case may be.
Okay, now that we've introduced you to some basics on sedimentology as well as on the seismic reservoir characterization, we will now discuss a case study, which is the R12 reservoir, and it's in a turbidic setting. Now, for those who are not familiar with the term turbidites, what we simply mean are gravity deposits. These are deposits you would find in the slopes and in the plains of your deltaic environment. So this is a simple map of this beautiful country called Nigeria. And for those who don't know where Port Harcourt is, that is where Port Harcourt is, so Lagos should be around there. So we're looking at an object in what we call today the slopes and to the basin floor area of the Niger Delta. So basically, this is your onshore, and your coastline or your shoreline is indicated by this very bold figure here. So everything in this plain red is what we call the conventional offshore, between 0 and 200 meters. And beyond that is where we have our slopes towards the basin. All right, so our case study, like I said, is coming from this context, and we're looking at turbidic deposits, otherwise known as gravity deposits. So here is just a structural map line or a section going in the north to south, so from the onshore to the deep offshore of the Niger Delta. So basically, we are looking at a subject within this domain of the slope to the basin floor. So what you can begin to pick out for those who are not so familiar with Niger Delta is that we have an extensional domain, so mostly normal faults, and then we move into a mixed zone, which we call a translational zone. We begin to have the forms of reverse faulting and also normal faulting, and then we have the compressive zone, which is marked by mostly the toe thrust of what has been pushed from the onshore. So this is just a picture of how the Niger Delta looks like, but our focus will be within the vicinity of the slope to the basin floor. Now, on the subject itself, so the reservoir is called an R12, and we want to show you what was initially planned before we decide to look into the subject again. So basically what we had here, first of all, very importantly, remember I talked about efficiency in field development. Now, the stakes meaning the resources or the volumes, how much hydrocarbons we expected in this reservoir was not so much, not bad, but not to the extent we would love it to be. So when you have situations like that, you need to optimize as best as possible with the number of wells, producers and injectors that you plan to have. So initially it was planned that we could have 2 producers in the green traits here and 2 injectors. So to explain what this map is, this is a structural map. So it's a structural map just showing you a topography, but within the subsurface. Okay, so this is the top map of our reservoir, the R12. So basically, we have a pool of hydrocarbon within this area mapped by the blue contour right here. So we already had 2 wells on that structure which have proven to be hydrocarbon bearing. So we had mapped out the extent of the pool, hence we know the volumes. We also have a sealing fault here, or a fault we believe is sealing, that indeed could pose a problem in terms of how we choose to develop the field, hence 2 producers, and at the time 2 injectors, okay? So the stakes were low, there were uncertainties in terms of geology on the reservoir geometry, and also on the faults and the way they were partitioned in the structure. So we have to think about how to optimize the wells, the number of injectors to the producers, and for the goal that we had, which we'll talk about later, is we needed to find enough reservoir that would be able to support whatever we find here. So whatever we find in our injectors, we needed to have enough sands that will have enough input to support the producers here. And there was a constraint at the time, which we'll see in the next slide. So those are the two wells, the G1 and the G5, which were hydrocarbon bearing in this area. So what was now then our approach? Of course, we had to go back G and G, meaning geology and geophysics, update everything we understand about the architectural elements. AE is a term for architectural elements, simply to say, if we have a reservoir, how does it look like in space? How does it look like overall in terms of its geometries? So we have to look at seismic data, the well data, try to improve our understanding by integrating what we have talked about earlier, notions of sedimentology or seismic stratigraphy, as well as seismic reservoir characterization. So this was now the objective that needed to be worked out, knowing that we wanted to optimize, save a lot of money, and still get good value. It was now considered, was it possible for us to have just the producers as they are in the two compartments, but instead of two injectors, why don't we have a single injector that will prove enough reservoirs across board, and then we will save one well and be able to still meet our objective. So with that came a second constraint. You can see all these lines you see here are not drawn by a child, but they are actually faults. It's not a game, but it's the reality of the field. A lot of faults, and when you have faults, you begin to think of possible barriers. So in addition to the structure and the limitation of the resources, we needed to ensure that we can have enough reservoirs in each of these panels, and we had 7 of these panels, and we had to ensure that we had a minimum of about, say, 50 or more meters in each of the 4 panels across, and hence a base case of about 400 meters in measured depth. So that was the challenge, and then of course it had to be a horizontal well. So taking this into mind, we now have to go back and review what can we do or what can't we do. Can we find what we expect to meet our objectives? So a few things, like just to highlight the things we had to use. We had seismic data, of course, and the seismic data had gone through several phases of processing, and the one that was considered for this model was the 2017 PSDM. So we also had wells, about 5 wells scattered around the structure, 2 of them in the pool area and the others around them with some pilot holes. Then of course we had also pre-existing models interpreted on previous seismic data sets, and we also had to review those as we went along. Okay, so these are some of the wells that we have. So we have 4 good wells in this place here. So we have the G1, which is right here in the south. We have the G5, we have the G2, and then the G4. So the reservoir is marked within the blue and the yellow traits. So quite good results overall, quite thick sands from 40 to about 55 meters. So once you start seeing those kind of thicknesses, you also have to start thinking what kind of bodies could there also be. Okay, so thicknesses of this sort are quite important. You also look at their forms, how do they stack, how do they organize, it's quite important. So on the seismic line, these are all those wells that you also see there. What else did we have? Of course, there was pressure data coming from those 2 wells, the G1 and the G5, G1 and G5, telling us that, okay, on a static level, not dynamic, on a static level, it looks like everybody is fine, so we don't really have much challenge, okay? We are looking at a common pool. Now the contacts seen at the wells were quite close, I think just about a meter difference, so we can explain all that. So it tells us that, okay, if we have this kind of configuration on the pressure, it could also indicate to us that probably the bodies coming from these 2 wells, the reservoirs encountered, could be communicating to each other, so the bodies could be connected. So that's the first information we could pick out from there. So the channels being the upper and the lower, as you'll see later, they could all be connected together at the static level. Okay, so that's another piece of information. So these were the models at the time, and this is how things can quickly change. Okay, things can quickly change based on information you have. The first model was in 2003. So this nice spaghetti here, we call them spaghettis, but that's a channel. Okay, it was a simple model. We have a lobe. A lobe is a huge reservoir of sand, normally tabular. Okay, and it's common in turbidites. So you had a huge system of lobes, so good sands, and then a single unitary spaghetti running at top, which was the model at the time. So it was clear, it's quite erosive, okay, and then the lobe at the base. So the configuration at the time remained 2 injectors, 2 producers within the lobe. Then in 2014, of course, with a new data set, a new review was done, and it has changed dramatically. So these are what we call architectural elements, okay? These are architectural elements. So this new model introduced some more features, more channels, but keeping an upper channel, which we see here, keeping some lower channels, and of course keeping a huge lobate body at the bottom. So you see how things really can evolve with the information you have, and this model was in part guided by the PSDM. So at this point, Ola will come back to tell us a little bit more about how you now build your rock physics into this understanding.
Okay, in the last slide, Mamodu put up a measure of the difference in evolution between 2 models, one in 2014 and one in 2003, and the other in 2014. Now, like you said, the main reason for that is that you have new data. Common sense means that if you have new data, you need to take a look and you need to see if there's anything different from what you've interpreted. Of course, the interpreter's experience comes in, but the main thing is when you get new data comes with new technology, new advances, new algorithms, and new techniques, so you need to look at it. And that's what we're going to do here. So basically, this is the workflow that we used the asset to finalize the work. Now, the basic one is what we call seismic reservoir characterization. It's important to note the word characterization. I need to go from seismic to reservoir. And to do that, I need to do a review of my seismic, of my well data. I need to do some rock physics, do seismic time. And I also need to do my basic picking and interpretation of my attributes. Now, the reason for this is that I need to pass a product to the sedimentologist that is able to interpret in terms of rocks and the positional environments, or architectural elements, both with the well data and the seismic attributes. And then the bottom line is to use A and B together to optimize the wells. And then pass this on to the reservoir engineers for well perturbation in the model to determine which of the well configurations will meet the demand for placement and production. So we take the first step quickly. It's important to review what you have. And that means we need to know the main limitations of the seismic. In the study area, the main limitations is actually from masking from overburden effects. And that comes in essence from 2 major things, shallow channels and also your canyons. For those who are geologists, remember that, if I remember very well, that the present is usually what the key to the, yes. And that's what you see here. The same channels that we have been chasing in most of our oil fields, if you look in the shallow levels, you also have them being replicated. And the problem with that is that at this level, they mostly will not be of interest to us for obvious reasons. And they become a problem because when you pass sound waves through them, you begin to find what we call masking or shadowing effects. The same thing you will do if a car is passing with full headlights and a guy runs across the road. During that period of time, whoever is at the back is not able to see the headlights. That's exactly what happens in seismic. Whatever you have here, you have the effect of the shallow canyons and the volcanoes. And you see that basically this is an outline, what we call an amplitude map of the reservoir. These are the architectural elements which he has interpreted. But in seismic terms, this is what you call your seismic, what we call natural seismic waveforms, where you have the channel producing this. Now you see how channels within here, but because of the masking at this level, you see that there are holes in the amplitudes. Now as we go along, when you get new data, sometimes you're able to undershoot this. Like for instance, this is a newer data. You're able to undershoot it and able to now produce seismic reservoir characterization products that the sedimentologists can find more
convenient interpreting. So it's important to always review your data before you launch any interpretation. Now the next step is to actually characterize the reservoir. And that means I need to understand clearly what the tops. Of course, I'll go back a bit now. What you see here is G5. It's an exploration well that discovered the part of the accumulation. Here you have the gamma ray log. In yellow here is just the sand. Of course, it has a top, it has a base. But what is important again is to know that it is filled with oil. And that oil has a contact. We know that the difference when you have separations between fluids, what you have is a contact. Now those two fluids will have different acoustic impedance properties. And clearly that contrast is always a movement from a softer to a harder one. So it always produces what we call a peak. So one of the things we do in reservoir characterization is to take the well information, because in actual fact the well is the truth at a particular time. All my seismic does is to try to extrapolate that truth from the well, so that at the end of the day you can do your sedimentary analysis. So the bottom line is to find that link. What is that link between what the well is saying and my seismic? And in trying to do that, I should be able to establish responses on seismic based on the well logs that I can project onto the seismic data. Now, what you have here are logs, geologic logs, and then your sonic logs. Now, at the end of the day, what I want to do is to do a modeling. For instance, that's what we call fluid substitution. I know the parameters of the rock. What I do in the lab or with my algorithm is to fill the rock in space with water, oil, and hydrocarbons, and measure the responses it will give me in time and space. And then go back to my well and see if those responses match what I see at the well. Now, this is what you find on the right. I do a convolution of my fluid substitution results, and I have what we call a gas response from the top of the well down to the bottom. I have an oil response from the top to the base, and then water response. And what I have here are the actual responses from the rock configuration of the R12. Now, in essence, I know that basically, I know already that what I have here is gas, oil, and water. These are the actual responses, these are the simulations, and I try to find a match between what I have at the well and the simulations. Once I'm able to find that link, I'm able to trust my seismic, because at the well, I know what the well contains. So I just extrapolate that and use that as a basis to find what the response would be at the top, at the base of the reservoir. So that's what we call a good foundation for seismic reservoir characterization. Show the link between your well and your seismic, and then you push your interpretation ahead. So this was done, and at the end of the day, what you have is a cartoon. Now this is what basically the reservoir looks like. You have a top, and then you have the oil-water contact. Now in seismic terms, in terms of characterization, since I already know the link, I know what kind of seismic character the top will be. I know what the base will be when it is in the hydrocarbon pool. Now, when I go to the water, it's a different ballgame. I don't want to go into a lot of petrophysics, but what happens is that in water, the seismic, the sound wave will behave differently than when it is in oil. So basically, what the seismic response will change. That's why you have the red here and the black here. This is a trough and this is a peak. And you see that the contact is clearly recognized by a very strong peak. So the idea now is to understand that already I have a second problem. Apart from imagery problems, I have a problem in essence that deals with the fact that the seismic response will change with fluid. So I should be able to find a way to characterize that. If I don't do that, what will happen at the end of the day is when the sedimentologist is interpreting, there's a tendency for him to miss the sand across the water contact because I'm not able to give him a seismic character that represents the rock when it is water bearing. So on the basis of that, what you clearly have is a transfer into picking. You go back to the seismic because I know what this is. I'm able to pick clearly my inter-reservoir bodies when it is in oil and when it is below the oil-water contact. You see that clearly the response below the oil-water contact is quite different from the top. So you transfer this knowledge into this domain, do your picking of the intra-reservoir bodies, and at the end of the day, you are able to produce more of what you call more confident time to structure maps, which you convert to depth, and which you also can, in essence, do some attribute extractions from. And you see clearly that this is what you see here. What you saw previously in the amplitude map, which was not clear based on imagery, you see clearly here, this is a spectral decomposition map. You're able to clearly see the channel fairways as they come and meander and go all the way down here. Now, so basically what this has done by moving from rock physics, doing the calibration and doing your characterization and then doing your picking, what you have done is that you have reduced your uncertainty in the reservoir presence. Because basically if I go back to this, this map, if I tell you that, oh, there's some sand here, I'm sure you will tell me that I'm saying cock and bull. But if I show you this, you believe more in this, isn't it? Because you're able to see clearly the waveforms based on the articles that have been extracted. Now we go past that into the seismic stratigraphic domain. On the basis of the reservoir characterization, what you have is that you are now able to interpret more the pathways of your sedimentary features. I'm going to leave part of this to Mamodu because here he's going to show you how to differentiate between channels, lobes, and sheets based on the reservoir characterization product that you see on the screen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so at this point is when it becomes interesting but also very difficult, because now with the knowledge we have, we begin to think of how we can fully understand these bodies. Now if I go back to the previous slide, Dr. Olasho, like he rightly said, it is very interesting to see how we've characterized what we have here. Okay, but we'll still have the challenge of seeing how we can look at these bodies in terms of their space all around. Now, I want to just come back to this map because it's coming from the seismic to tell us one thing that is quite important to keep in mind. And because we're dealing with turbidites, generally most of the systems can be what we call meandering systems. Now, for those of you who have studied meandering systems, one thing you should always retain about meandering systems is that they are very lazy. We call them lazy systems, being that they are low energy systems, they would always look for the easiest path to take in their deposition because the gradient is low. Okay, so when you see these forms, so these younger channels we have here, they are already telling us something. So when I see a younger channel of this sort that comes in this way and then it turns, it tells me that there must be something around here that is making him to turn. He would not turn just like that. He's looking for the easiest path. So whenever I see those forms, it gives me a hint that something must be stopping it or making it turn. So you can see the relationship here between this younger one and this other channel we've drawn here. You see where this guy turns is because there was another channel there. So we keep that in mind, taking into account the quality of the data set, and this is how we came about the understanding, knowing that this area of our interest is quite faulty. So in a simple cartoon, I'll show you a few lines. So here's the green. So this line is taken along the red path there. So what we can pick out from here is this. We were able to identify first a most lowermost system in a quite tabular form, but mostly due to channel lateral accretion. It's quite common in the deltas and intermediate settings. And then we have a younger channel, which we call a lower channel, upper channel here. And then it terminates with the youngest of them all, which we call a late stage channel field, which is indicated by the green. So we have a lower system, we have a channel system indicated by the orange, and then the late field, which is indicated by the green. So it tells us a kind of story that we're looking at channel amalgamation, okay, which can actually give us good sound connectivity, but it can also introduce heterogeneities. So that's one cartoon that we have right there. And then we have a green section, a blue section, which is taken along this path here, which shows us the relationship between the lower channel. Now it becomes more difficult because of the 14, and then the upper channel. So you need to believe me. And then, and then we have the green line, okay, which shows us the relationship between the yellow channel and the orange channel. But very importantly, like I said earlier on, this is a good guide, which I've found in many of the things that I've looked at as a good way to understand what is happening below. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. So based on that, we built up this new story with several systems. So I tried to draw a similar cartoon to what I explained to be happening right here. So with all the fluid effects, with all the many systems, we could recognize a lower complex, we could recognize an upper complex, and they are very good reservoirs. The wells have proven it. We also believe there's connectivity between the sands as the pressures had showed to us. So this was the cartoon or the image we now use to try and deduce what we will now do in the next stage of the well placement. So I'll end up with these two slides. So here is just some thickness maps. We call them thickness maps of the different bodies. So this is the upper channel. So it was well constrained. All right, and then the thickness map. So you can see the lower channel with the limitations we have. We know where the thickness is, but still we are trying as best as possible to see how we could draw its paths. But nevertheless, we're able to deduce, based on the relationship between these channels, be able to deduce with well information as well, where we think our reservoir passes and how our reservoir overall behaves. So Ola will now show us the results and also the inputs from the impedance and other cubes.
So what we had at the end of the day, after the interpretation of the sedimentologist and some more seismic reservoir characterization work, is input into the well placement. And that means guiding the well to its final destination. Now, but, just to remind you, the idea is to reduce 2 injectors to 1. Save cost. But the bottom line is if you reduce the 2 into 1, is that single one going to be able to push water all through the channel bodies to where the 2 producers are? You don't save $80 million only for you to come back later and say, oh, I should have drilled 2 injectors. So what we find, what we see, what I'll show you next are basically the results. Or, yes, the result, just for us to get right to the end. Now, this is the seismic section, an example of section I showed you earlier on in several slides. Now, this is the seismic data that we had at the time for the drilling. This black are the faults, and this is the major sealing fault. The idea is to have an injector that will be long enough to have sands on either sides of the sealing fault to push water all through the producers and also have sand in each of these panels. Now, what you see here are the results of the sand and shale results from the wells. A V-clay log deduced from your gamma ray log. Now, clearly, what you see clearly is that more or less you have sand discovered by the well that has been planned based on the integration of the sedimentology and the seismic reservoir characterization. You have sand in each of the panels, and also you have sands on either sides of the sealing fault. Now, this is just on the basis of the seismic itself. Now, it looks easy here because already we've drilled the well, we know the results. But if I remove this well from here and tell you, okay, please draw a line to where the well will be, you look at me basically, unless you have quite some experience. But the next thing I'll show you is to ask you a second question. Now, I'm going to produce a product from the seismic reservoir characterization, which we call the P impedance cube. Now, basically, what this means is this is a representation of the rocks in terms of, who remembers what I said earlier, layers. Now, this is a representation in terms of what? Interfaces. Now, here clearly, anybody seeing this will know that this is quite different from this. Now, to us in an impedance domain, this is soft and this is hard. So basically, what you will see that the whole of this is a layer of sand, and the whole of this is a layer of sand, and what you have here are basically shales, which you see that the well perfectly correlates. So we had a system where we're able to plan the wells based on your seismic characterization in conjunction with the seismic interpretations. But I'm also going to produce the final bus stop in terms of cubes in seismic reservoir, which is your inversion cube or your pseudo V-clay cube. And that is just by a click here, which will be the next. You see, this is what we call the Bible of seismic reservoir characterization. Basically, what you have is your pseudo V-clay cube. The word V-clay is the volume of clay. It's an attribute from your seismic where you can deduce the volume of clay directly from your seismic, which your seismic data cannot do on its own. So basically, what we have here is all these are V-clays. That means low V-clays, which we call sands, and also these are called the shales. It is quite easy here to place a well on the basis of this cube than it is on the basis of the seismic itself. But bottom line again is this really will not make sense if you are not able to deduce a model from it. Remember in the first 2 slides I told you the bottom line is arriving at the model from the seismic, and that is clearly what has been done here. You're able to drill this well in such a way that you discover sands where you say they are going to be, and on either sides of the sealing fault with enough completions to drive water from the 2 panels to the producers. Instead of drilling one well here and another well here, At the end of the day, what we have in terms of placement is an optimization in terms of robust currency between the conventional seismic